Um, how exactly does a 7.5 magnitude earthquake in Venezuela dictate the price of a Swedish candy bar in New York? Welcome to Financial Candy. It is June 25, 2026, and in today's deep dive into the source material, we are looking at the bizarre, invisible choke points running the global economy. We are completely bypassing the dry analyst jargon to, decode the actual money mechanisms driving the market mood today.
Right, because the best way to understand the macroeconomy it's not by staring at aggregate gross domestic product charts. You really have to follow the weird incentives hiding in the margins. When you look at where companies are suddenly extracting historic profits or, where they are intentionally taking losses, well, you uncover the actual structural leverage running the world right now.
So let's follow that leverage straight to the top of the tech food chain. Apple just hiked the price on the 1 terabyte MacBook Pro from $1,699 to $1,999. We're seeing a 17 to 25% price jump across Macs and iPads. But the fascinating part is that this is not your standard consumer inflation. It is a massive memory chip shortage caused by the artificial intelligence industry acting like a giant, insatiable vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, everyday consumers are essentially fighting billion-dollar AI models for the exact same basic computer parts. To understand why, you have to look at how artificial intelligence actually functions at a physical hardware level. AI models require massive clusters of graphics processing units, or GPUs, but a GPU is useless if it cannot access data fast enough.
Right. It needs high bandwidth memory to feed it information constantly, which used to be a pretty boring commodity business, right? Manufacturers just sold them cheap for laptops and cell phones.
Exactly. But now, data center companies are hoarding every single piece of high bandwidth memory they can find, so their incredibly expensive GPUs do not sit idle. And memory manufacturers suddenly realized they hold the keys to the entire AI revolution.
Which perfectly explains what is happening with Micron technology. Because of this sudden artificial scarcity, market data shows Micron is achieving historic gross margins of almost 85%. I mean, let that sink in. An 85% gross margin on physical hardware? They are beating NVIDIA's 75% and Meta's 82%.
Micron essentially went from selling a basic commodity to being the absolute margin king of the tech sector simply because they control the bottleneck. But the scale of capital required to keep that bottleneck fed it's forcing fundamental changes in how companies finance their operations. Broadcom is projecting $100 billion in AI revenue by their fiscal 2027.
But buying billions of dollars in networking chips and memory absolutely destroys a company's balance sheet. How do their customers even afford that?
Well, to help customers actually afford all this hardware, Broadcom is setting up a special purpose vehicle with massive alternative asset managers like Apollo and Blackstone to provide debt financing.
Wait, let me translate that because the mechanism sounds wild. A tech company buying AI chips cannot afford them up front. So Broadcom teams up with private equity firms to give the buyer a massive loan. I mean, that sounds entirely like a subprime mortgage for computer parts. Are we just financing corporate infrastructure on credit to keep the AI bubble inflated?
It is a deliberate strategy to isolate financial risk. A special purpose vehicle, or SPV, is a completely separate legal entity. By partnering with private credit markets, Broadcom takes the lending risk off its own books. The debt sits in the SPV.
So the buyers get their chips, Broadcom gets its sales revenue, and Apollo collects the interest.
Precisely. But the limits the AI industry is hitting are not just financial, they are purely physical. Anthropic, which recently crossed a $965 billion valuation with a $47 billion revenue run rate, is furiously expanding data centers into Australia and Japan.
They are migrating across the globe just to plug into a wall socket. That implies the digital cloud isn't in the cloud at all. It is a massive physical, energy-guzzling supply chain. And the U.S. power grid must be completely maxed out.
It is. The queue to connect a new massive data center to the U.S. grid can take years. Anthropic needs stable, renewable energy sources immediately, and, they want them far away from geopolitical conflict zones. Competing against that kind of entrenched globalized capital is proving brutal for challengers.
Like Cerebras, right, the newer chipmaker trying to take on the incumbents.
Yeah.
They just reported their first earnings since going public, and their core gross margin actually shrank to between 36 and 38%. That is a stark contrast. Micron is at 85% and Cerebras is at 36%.
When the massive incumbents are locking up all the financing vehicles and all the physical power grids, new entrants get severely squeezed. And that structural squeeze on physical resources completely warps how Wall Street reads corporate success across the broader economy. The digital world relies entirely on complex physical logistics, and trading algorithms often misread how those logistics actually function.
Which brings us to FedEx. They just reported a very strong quarter with $25 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
But algorithms heavily punished the stock in after-hours trading because their operating margin came in at 8.35%, slightly missing the 8.44% estimate.
Huh.
But the culprit for that margin miss was just fuel surcharges, right?
Yeah, let's unpack the math on that illusion. FedEx passes fuel costs directly to customers. They make a 0% profit margin on that specific surcharge. So mathematically, as fuel prices rise and that surcharge gets bigger, their overall profit margin percentage drops.
Right. It is like splitting a group dinner bill. Say the food costs $100, and the restaurant makes a $20 profit on that food. That is a 20% margin. Now, the restaurant adds a mandatory $50 tip that goes straight to the waiter. Your total bill is now $150.
Exactly. The restaurant's $20 profit now looks like a much smaller percentage of that bigger total bill, even though they still made their full $20. Wall Street algorithms penalized FedEx for a mathematical quirk, even though their actual dollar earnings were completely protected.
They are essentially being punished for protecting themselves. That pass-through cost mechanism is a brilliant defensive strategy during volatile energy markets. And the physical reality of moving goods is it's highly sensitive to unpredictable geopolitical shocks, like the 7.5 magnitude earthquake that just struck Venezuela.
This humanitarian crisis has massive immediate economic implications. The U.S. government is immediately deploying disaster assistance, but you have to remember, Venezuela is currently the largest oil supplier to the United States. U.S.-controlled exports from Venezuela surged to $3.7 billion in April alone.
So any physical disruption to that flow impacts the entire global energy complex, and the politics of oil pricing are intensifying alongside these physical disruptions. Donald Trump recently accused major oil companies like Chevron and Exxon of price gouging. He argued that since wholesale Brent crude dropped back down to around $74 a barrel, gasoline at the pump should be $2.25 a gallon.
Setting aside the intense political pressure there, Chevron's executives publicly defended the industry by pointing to the pure mechanics of the supply chain. The disconnect happens because the crude oil market trades on computer screens. Prices drop instantly the moment a financial trade is executed.
But the physical gasoline market involves pulling heavy crude out of the ground, putting it on an ocean tanker, refining it into usable fuel, and then trucking it to a local station. That creates a massive time delay between the screen price and the street price.
That physical supply chain lag means it takes weeks for a drop in crude prices to trickle down to the consumer level. Refineries are currently processing oil they bought a month ago at significantly higher prices. They cannot instantly slash pump prices without taking a massive loss on the inventory they already purchased.
But Costco understands that exact consumer frustration at the pump perfectly, and they use it as a massive weapon. They sell gas as a loss leader. Record gas sales are driving incredible warehouse foot traffic.
Right. Motorists show up to save a few dollars on fuel, feeling the pinch of that supply chain lag, and then walk inside to buy high-margin groceries and electronics. That strategy is maintaining Costco's phenomenal 92.2% North American membership renewal rate. They are basically leveraging a macroeconomic pain point to lock in consumer loyalty.
Costco's strategy really reveals the current psychology of the consumer. Everyday essentials feel prohibitively expensive, and while consumers are looking for clever ways to treat themselves without breaking the bank, you can treat your brain to financial candy, brain candy, and classic audiobooks at clarineratio.com.
And that consumer exhaustion is a global issue. We see living standards stagnating everywhere. In the UK, official figures show average living standards growth has halved since 2007. That stagnation is severely limiting the fiscal flexibility of politicians like Rachel Reeves and Andy Burnham as they navigate really tight fiscal rules in bond markets.
The squeeze is definitely happening everywhere. In Jersey, officials are clashing over the implementation of a living wage to protect low-paid workers while simultaneously trying to cut public spending. The consumer is clearly exhausted. Gap just cut their sales guidance after Old Navy completely missed expectations on dresses and swimwear.
The CEO claimed it was just a product assortment issue, arguing that they simply designed clothes people did not want to buy. But U.S. consumer sentiment hit historic lows in May.
Yeah, I have to push back on the CEO's optimism there. Is it really just an ugly dress? Or are consumers actually tapped out on mid-tier spending? If your real wages are stagnant, you are not buying an aspirational summer wardrobe.
The macroeconomic data heavily contradicts the CEO. Consumers are actively abandoning mid-tier discretionary purchases like clothing, but they're optimizing for microjoys. We are witnessing a massive resurgence of the lipstick effect. Historically, during tight economic times, people buy small luxury items like a premium lipstick instead of a new handbag.
They want the psychological boost of a purchase without the financial ruin. And today, that effect is driving a boom in independent candy stores across New York City. Places like Economy Candy and Bon Bon are expanding aggressively.
Consumers are abandoning big purchases for cheap luxury treats. Even though a basic Hershey bar now costs over $1 due to global cocoa supply chain issues, people will happily spend $10 on imported Swedish candy to feel a momentary sense of luxury.
The attention economy is experiencing the exact same shift toward cheap, fragmented consumption. Live sports viewership is moving rapidly to TikTok and YouTube. The recent NBA Finals Game 5 generated 4 billion views on social media.
Younger fans are consuming the highlights for free on their phones rather than paying for premium linear TV bundles. Media rights holders must be terrified of this trend. Professional leagues need the massive broadcast fees from traditional networks to survive.
They are essentially getting the candy of the game for free and ignoring the expensive main course of a cable subscription. Why pay $150 a month for cable when your living standards are squeezed and TikTok gives you the best moments for $0?
Exactly. But leagues also need the engagement of younger demographics on social platforms to build future audiences. TikTok is acting as a necessary intermediary, funneling some viewers toward the live broadcast. The underlying reality is that Gen Z and Gen Alpha prefer consuming content where they already exist, rather than paying for a walled garden.
The contrast between how everyday consumers scrape together small joys on TikTok and how massive capital moves around the globe is striking. Like, a federal judge is moving forward with a lawsuit challenging the Department of Justice's $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund.
And that massive pool of money stemmed from a $10 billion IRS settlement with Donald Trump. Setting the politics of that specific case entirely aside, the sheer scale of government settlement mechanics operating entirely outside the normal consumer economy is fascinating.
That separation between the everyday economy and structural wealth is becoming more pronounced every year. U.S. charitable giving topped $617.2 billion in 2025. That massive number was heavily driven by a blistering stock market and a 16.6% surge in bequests, which are gifts made after death.
This is the clear beginning of the great wealth transfer. We are looking at an estimated $124 trillion passing down to heirs over the next couple of decades. But the philanthropy sector is dangerously reliant on a tiny fraction of the population. Just 9 megadonors accounted for over $22 billion in giving.
So we have a hyper-efficient, tax-advantaged pipeline for billionaires to move wealth to global charities. But there is an equally hyper-efficient dark pipeline for scammers to extract middle-class savings across borders, isn't there?
Unfortunately, yes. Global fraud losses now exceed $500 billion a year. Scams are no longer just a lone hacker in a basement. They are highly structured, multinational corporate operations. Market data shows a victim in the UK recently lost roughly $107,000 to a romance scam where the funds moved through Cyprus, Nigeria, and Romania in a matter of days.
Losing $107,000 to a coordinated romance scam is devastating, but the sheer speed of that capital flight is terrifying. These networks are operating like sophisticated multinational banks, but solely for extraction. How does the money move through 3 different countries before the victim even realizes it is gone?
The industrialization of these scams relies on complex layers of shell companies and international banking portals. The operation itself often uses trafficked labor operating out of massive compounds in places like Myanmar and Cambodia. These centers operate with corporate targets, written psychological scripts, and sophisticated fake websites.
The vulnerability of a fully digitized global economy is immense. The exact same borderless financial infrastructure that allows a company like Broadcom to fund AI chips in California or mega donors to fund global science initiatives also allows criminal syndicates to operate fraud networks at a scale that rivals the gross domestic product of small nations.
The economy in 2026 is not just a story of inflation or growth metrics. It is a story of structural leverage. From Micron squeezing tech giants for memory capacity, to Costco leveraging cheap gas to sell bulk groceries, to international scammers exploiting digital trust. The winners are the entities that control the invisible choke points.
That leaves us with a wild thought to ponder. Consider what happens when the exact same generative AI technology causing your iPad price to spike is fully adopted and deployed by those $500 billion international scam networks. As AI models become faster and cheaper, the barrier to industrial scale fraud drops to near zero. A scam center won't need traffic labor to write scripts. An AI can run 10,000 personalized romance scams simultaneously. In finance, every technological leap builds a new tool for both creation and extraction. The choke points are shifting again.